On June 10th of this year, a security researcher who goes by the name Nightmare Eclipse released a flaw in Windows Defender that grants an attacker complete control over your computer. Full administrator access. On a fully patched machine. On a machine that downloaded every update Microsoft pushed out this year. The patch that fixes it does not exist. That was his 7th attack in 6 weeks. 3 of his previous 6 are already being used by criminals against real targets. And he made a promise. On July 14th, the same day Microsoft releases its monthly security updates, he said he would, in his words, make Microsoft's bones shatter. Then, exhausted from his last release, he said he might not show up at all. He hasn't decided yet. That is where this story stands right now. And the question of whether he shows up on July 14th is not the most important question in this story. The most important question is how one person, working alone, got this far and why Microsoft handed him every weapon he used. Let's start with what is confirmed and documented. 7 Windows 0 days. Released publicly, in sequence. Over 6 weeks, a 0 day is a security flaw with no available fix. The moment it is published, every Windows computer on Earth becomes vulnerable, and it stays vulnerable until Microsoft builds and ships a patch. Sometimes that takes days, sometimes weeks. In this case, some of these flaws still have no complete fix as of the middle of June 2026. His 7th exploit, the one called RoguePlanet, targets Windows Defender specifically. It carries a SIST score of 9.6. To put that in context, SIST scores run from 0 to 10. A score of 9.6 means critical. It means the flaw is easy to exploit, requires no special permissions to trigger, and delivers the highest level of system access an attacker can obtain. Will Dorman, a senior vulnerability analyst at Theros Labs, tested it independently and confirmed it works. His assessment, it's reportedly not 100% reliable, but it worked on the first attempt for me. 3 of his 6 earlier exploits, the ones he named Red Sun, Undefend, and Blue Hammer, are being actively used by real attackers against real targets right now. Not theoretically. Not in a lab. In the wild. Muhammad Qasim Shahzad, a systems engineer, wrote on LinkedIn, "One person caused more enterprise-level damage in 6 weeks than most apt groups cause in a year." APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. That is the category governments and intelligence agencies use to describe state-sponsored hacking units. North Korea, Russia, Iran, one researcher, working alone, in 6 weeks, matched their operational impact. And here is what makes this story different from every other security incident you have read about. This researcher did not start out trying to attack Microsoft. He started out trying to help them. The person behind these exploits goes by Nightmare Eclipse, also identified in some posts as Chaotic Eclipse. He has not been publicly identified by his real name. His avatar on social media is Albert Wesker, the villain from the Resident Evil video game series. A scientist. A researcher. Someone who worked inside a powerful institution, was wronged by it, and went rogue. Whether that parallel is deliberate or coincidental, it fits with uncomfortable precision. He claims to be a former Microsoft employee. That claim has not been independently verified. What has been verified is that he knows Windows at a level that takes years to develop. The depth of these exploits, across the kernel, across BitLocker, across Windows Defender, is not beginner territory. These are the kinds of vulnerabilities that take intimate familiarity with how Windows actually works at its lowest levels. In early 2026, he says he began doing what responsible security researchers do. He found flaws in Windows. He reported them to Microsoft. He used the official channel, the Microsoft Security Response Center, known as the MSERC, which is the formal process Microsoft has set up specifically so researchers can report vulnerabilities safely, confidentially, and without putting the public at risk. What he says happened next is the foundation of this entire story. He says Microsoft deleted the MSERC account he used to file his reports. He says they refused to communicate with him. He says they withheld bug bounty payments, money Microsoft promises to researchers who find and responsibly report serious vulnerabilities. And then, after all of that, he says Microsoft publicly humiliated him by publishing a security advisory that implied he had not reported anything, when he says they had deleted the very account he used to do so. Microsoft has not confirmed or denied his account of these events in specific detail. What Microsoft did do is publish a blog post about what they called uncoordinated vulnerability disclosure, in which they claimed none of the bugs were reported through official channels before publication. They also raised the possibility of involving their digital crimes unit, a reference widely understood as a legal threat. That legal threat is where the story shifts from a personal grievance to an industry-wide reckoning. But to understand why, you need to know what Nightmare said in response, in his own words. He wrote a personal statement, not a press release, not a legal document. A statement posted publicly in plain language addressed to Microsoft directly. He wrote, "When I actively asked you to communicate with me, you refused, humiliated me, and made sure to insult me in front of people. You defamed me in public with your CV advisory, even though you literally deleted the Microsoft account I used to report bugs to you with, and I got 0 pennies from doing so, and I still happily did like an idiot." Read that again. 0 pennies. He did the work. He found the vulnerabilities. He went through the process. And he got nothing. Not payment, not acknowledgement, not communication, and then had his name dragged through a public advisory that made him look like the irresponsible party. His response was to keep releasing. Red Sun, Undefend, Blue Hammer, Yellow Key, a BitLocker bypass exploit, Green Plasma, Mini Plasma, each one published publicly on GitHub and GitLab with working proof of concept code. Working, meaning anyone, a criminal, a state actor, a script kiddie, could take that code and use it immediately against any unpatched Windows system. He picked a date, July 14th, the same date Microsoft publishes its monthly security patches, Patch Tuesday. He chose it deliberately, and he said, "Mark this date, July 14th. I will make sure your bones are shattered that day." That statement went across the security community immediately. Now here is the part that turns the industry reaction from sympathy to outrage, and it has to do with something Microsoft did years ago that makes their legal threat against Nightmare look like one rule for them and a different rule for everyone else. Kevin Beaumont is not a fringe voice. He is a widely respected security researcher and a former Microsoft employee, someone who spent years inside the institution he is now criticizing. When he weighed in on this situation, the security community listened. His assessment of Microsoft's handling was blunt and specific. A dumpster fire of their own making. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. Something Microsoft built, piece by piece, through its own decisions. Katie Muzuris went further. She is the CEO of Luda Security and one of the people who literally designed the modern bug bounty framework, the system that Microsoft itself uses to incentivize responsible vulnerability disclosure. If anyone has standing to judge whether Microsoft honored its own process, it is her. She used the same dumpster fire language and added a sharper critique. That Microsoft's framing around responsible disclosure was not just outdated terminology, but a symptom of a deeper cultural problem. An institution that still treats independent researchers as adversaries to be managed, rather than partners who are doing necessary work the institution cannot do for itself. But the detail that landed hardest, the one that shifted the conversation from criticism to outrage, was not about Nightmare Eclipse at all. It was about a precedent Microsoft set years earlier. A researcher called Sandbox Escaper did almost exactly this before. She found serious Windows 0 days, grew frustrated with Microsoft's handling, and released them publicly without patches in place. Working exploit code. Publicly posted. Unpatched systems exposed. The same pattern, the same method, the same breach of the coordinated disclosure process Microsoft now calls irresponsible. Microsoft's response at the time was to offer her a job. When Nightmare Eclipse published his 0 days, and Microsoft's response was to invoke its Digital Crimes Unit, a division that exists to pursue criminal cases, the security community pointed directly at that history without hesitation. The implication being drawn was not subtle. Microsoft applies one standard to researchers it chooses to reward, and a different standard to researchers it chooses to threaten. And it was difficult to look at the two cases side by side without asking why one person walked away with an employment offer and another walked away with a legal warning. Microsoft did not answer that question directly. What they did, after the backlash reached sufficient volume across the security research community, was issue a clarification stating they had no intention of pursuing legal action against researchers. The retreat was public. It was also completely irrelevant to Nightmare Eclipse by the time it came. He had already made his decision. The legal threat had not slowed him down. It had not changed his calculus. And on June 10th, he released RoguePlanet, the most dangerous exploit of the 7, with no patch and no timeline for one. RoguePlanet targets Windows Defender. See vSys 9.6. Grants full system access, the highest privilege level on a Windows machine, on a fully patched Windows 10 or Windows 11 system. Microsoft's own GitHub, the platform they own, initially hosted the proof of concept code before banning his account. He moved to GitLab. The code remained available. As of the middle of June 2026, there is no patch for RoguePlanet. And then came the message that turned the July 14th deadline from a threat into something stranger and more unsettling. After releasing RoguePlanet, Nightmare Eclipse posted an update. Not a threat, not a declaration, something closer to exhaustion. He wrote, "Unfortunately, I will be unable to mass disclose 0 days on July 14th. RoguePlanet took way more time than expected and truly drained me. I might take a break, but I can't say for sure what I will be doing for next month. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's SMTG. That word, SMTG, shorthand for something, is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. He said he would destroy Microsoft on July 14th. Then he said he might not be able to. Or he might do something. He does not know. He is tired. That is the human reality behind this story. A person who spent months finding serious security vulnerabilities in one of the most widely used software systems on Earth, went through the official process to report them, says he was deleted, ignored, defamed, and paid nothing, and then spent 6 weeks releasing exploit after exploit, working alone, at a pace that senior security analysts compared to state-sponsored hacking programs, and ended up exhausted and uncertain. Whatever your view of his methods, that picture is not comfortable. For the ordinary Windows user watching this video, the situation is concrete and present. 3 of his exploits are being used by criminals today. RoguePlanet, the most dangerous one, has no patch. If you are running Windows 10 or Windows 11, fully updated as of this recording, and someone uses RoguePlanet against your machine, Windows Defender cannot stop them. The tool built specifically to protect you is the vulnerability. There is no clean answer to what you should do about that. Microsoft has not said when a patch is coming. What security professionals generally recommend in unpatched situations is behavioral caution. Do not open attachments from unknown sources. Do not click links in unsolicited emails and keep your other security layers active. That is not a solution. It is damage limitation while waiting for a solution that is not yet scheduled. July 14th falls on a Tuesday. Patch Tuesday. The day Microsoft ships its monthly fixes. Whether Nightmare shows up with something, shows up with nothing, or does not show up at all, the security community will be watching that day more closely than they have watched any Patch Tuesday in years. This story is easy to misread in 2 directions. Both misreadings are tempting. Both collapse under scrutiny. The first is to treat Nightmare Eclipse as a hero. The grievance may be real. The frustration may be entirely justified. But heroism requires that the response be proportionate to the wrong, and releasing working exploit code publicly, without patches in place, with full knowledge that criminals would pick it up immediately, caused harm to people who had nothing to do with any of it. The attackers using Red Sun, Undefend, and Bluehammer against real targets right now are not sitting in Microsoft's headquarters. They are in the networks of businesses, hospitals, local governments, and ordinary individuals who never heard of the MemSource, never participated in any bug bounty dispute, and had no means of protecting themselves from a vulnerability they did not know existed. Those people are not Microsoft's victims. They are collateral damage in someone else's war. That distinction matters, and it does not disappear because Microsoft behaved badly first. The second misread is to treat Microsoft as the aggrieved party. The the responsible institution set upon by an irrational actor. That framing does not survive even a brief examination of how bug bounty programs actually function. Microsoft did not create the MCIRC out of generosity. It created it because independent security researchers find vulnerabilities that Microsoft's own internal teams miss, and a formal reporting channel gives Microsoft time to build patches before those vulnerabilities reach criminals. The program runs on a specific promise: bring us your findings through the right channel, and we will pay you, credit you, and fix the problem. That promise is the entire foundation of the arrangement. If Nightmare Eclipse's account is even partially accurate, if Microsoft deleted the account he used to file reports, withheld payments he had earned, and then published an advisory suggesting he had never reported anything at all, then Microsoft did not just break a promise to one researcher. It demonstrated publicly that the promise is conditional, that it can be revoked, that the channel Microsoft asks researchers to trust can be closed without explanation or recourse. Every researcher watching this situation now has to weigh that precedent the next time they find a serious Windows vulnerability and decide whether to go through official channels or not. Microsoft did not just wrong one person, it damaged the credibility of its own system for everyone who relies on that system working. Neither side in this story is clean. But only one of them built a process, asked people to trust it, and then allegedly dismantled it when honoring it became inconvenient. The sandbox escaper parallel cuts both ways. You can read it as evidence of Microsoft's inconsistency. You can also read it as evidence that Microsoft does eventually find ways to work with difficult researchers, that the system is imperfect but not broken. Both readings have merit. What is not in dispute is the outcome. 7-0 days. 3 actively exploited. 1 with no patch, no timeline, and a CVSys score of 9.6. And a security community that is publicly, vocally, and on the record telling Microsoft they created this situation. The question of what happens on July 14th is almost beside the point now. The damage is already done. The exploits are already out. The criminals are already using them. Whether Nightmare releases more, or takes a break, or disappears entirely, the vulnerabilities he already found will be in circulation until Microsoft patches every single one of them. We open this video with a single researcher, 7 exploits, and a promise to make Microsoft's bones shatter on July 14th. We end in the same place, except now we know that July 14th is uncertain. He said he might show up. He said he might not. He said he is tired. What is not uncertain is this: one person, working alone, with technical knowledge and a grievance, did more measurable damage to Microsoft's security reputation in 6 weeks than most state-sponsored operations manage in a year. And he did it using a system Microsoft built and then allegedly dismantled the moment it became inconvenient. That is the story of institutional power, and what happens when institutions stop honoring the agreements that make them functional with researchers, users, and anyone who trusted the system.